Extinction didn't erase their terror. It seems to have sealed their legacy in blood and bone. For over 500 million years, our planet was a proving ground for predators, nature constantly the rules of survival. I find it fascinating that Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, was initially mistaken for a hyena. It was those cheek teeth that threw off the paleontologists before a wealth of fossils revealed its true identity, a fearsome Ice Age predator. Imagine being an apex predator, ruling the wild from the top of the food chain. Life at the top has its perks, but even the most fearsome hunters aren't always the biggest beasts. When it comes to the predator game, size isn't everything. Every so often, though, nature outdoes itself, creating a carnivore so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting big game that it seems almost like a creature of myth. These rare beasts develop weapons tailored specifically for tackling the giants of their time. Not too long ago, just a blink of an eye in Earth's timeline, one such feline prowled our planet. This wasn't just any big cat. This was the undisputed monarch of the Ice Age, Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat extraordinaire. With its iconic saber teeth and fierce appearance, Smilodon is one of the most instantly recognizable extinct predators, a status solidified by its portrayal in popular films like Ice Age. But while the world knows it as a saber-toothed cat, it didn't start out that way. Rewind the clock about 160 years and picture yourself in Brazil. It's here that our tale begins with a discovery that would perplex the scientific community. When the first Smilodon remains were unearthed, paleontologists didn't immediately recognize them as belonging to a cat. In fact, their initial guess was way off the mark. Based on some isolated cheek teeth that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of modern hyenas, they dubbed this new find hyena Neogaea. However, within a couple of years, the tides of discovery brought forth a tsunami of new fossils. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which seemed almost comically oversized for any mouth, painted a very different picture. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of Feline, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon Populator was born. Smilodon, meaning knife tooth, and Populator, roughly translating to the destroyer, or he who brings devastation. If you're thinking that sounds like the title of a heavy metal album, you're not wrong. And it's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling the Smilodon's family tree. This quest for understanding continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Machairodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers or any living cats for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the Feline subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machairodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontidae, or, as some paleontologists like to call them, the dirk-toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontidae lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power, thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table: S. Gracilis, S. Fatalis, and S. Populator. Now, if you found yourself face to face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch, but they did have their differences. First up, we have S. Gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterion. Next came S. Fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly a million years later. Last but certainly not least, S. Populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after Fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. Gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern Jaguar. S. Fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos, or 620 pounds, of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today, but S. Populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos, or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you were facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, you were in serious trouble. I sometimes imagine walking through the Brea Tar Pits, and I wonder what it must have been like to see Smilodon in its prime. It wasn't just a big cat, it was built like a prehistoric tank. Its heel bone alone was a marvel of natural engineering, so robust and elongated. I've read speculation that these Ice Age predators could have even outleaped modern lions, which can clear heights of 15 feet. Imagine that. A cat the size of a bear leaping over a one-story building. But it wasn't just fancy footwork. Smilodon's forelimbs were on another level. They were about 20% thicker than what you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it incredible strength, surpassing even the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, Smilodon was armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved like prehistoric scimitars. They were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of Smilodon size. We're talking about claws twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and even longer than those of a Kodiak brown bear, an animal that can weigh twice as much. These weren't just weapons. They were nature's grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. Of course, when I think of Smilodon, it's not its impressive leap or powerful forearms that come to mind. It's those teeth, those iconic, impossibly long canines that have captured imaginations for generations. Saber-teeth aren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has experimented with this design in various mammals, and even some non-mammals throughout history. But Smilodon perfected it, taking the concept to a new level. What made Smilodon's fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer length. We're talking about canines so long they protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature that was uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. To put it in perspective, Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches long. That's longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction, shaped like deadly daggers with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides, designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Here's where things get really interesting. You'd expect a predator with teeth like that to have a powerful bite to match, but studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, about 1,000 newtons, which is 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? That's been a subject of much debate among paleontologists. One popular theory suggests that Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Picture this: a Smilodon hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey. Using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws, it pins down its victim. With precision, it sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone agrees with this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different but equally grim scenario. They propose that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise lethal bite to the throat. This would have caused severe blood loss and suffocation, a quick, if not particularly pleasant end for its unfortunate victims. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. That's almost twice as wide as a human can manage. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans of Smilodon skulls suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, which was crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils show trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. This suggests that not only were they quick on their feet, but they were also willing to risk life and limb, or at least a bruised chest, in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter, capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today: giant bison, camels, and, if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. Yes, these cats were taking down creatures that dwarfed modern elephants. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Leptopterna, various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans, cementing its status as a top predator. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence such as tooth marks on bones or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey, providing vital clues about its diet. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic curiosity. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodons lived socially comes from the Brea Tar Pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. The Brea Tar Pits, even the name sends a shiver down my spine. Imagine being a massive herbivore, trapped, sinking slowly. But the truly unsettling part is realizing that predators, drawn by the promise of an easy meal, often met the same sticky fate. They got stuck trying to eat the trapped herbivores. I've spent hours examining the fossil records from those pits, and the sheer number of Smilodon bones is staggering. Over 166,000 as best we can tell. This abundance has led some to wonder if Smilodon, contrary to our assumptions, might have been a social animal. The idea is that, like modern social cat species, they might have been responsive to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon became trapped, its calls for help could have lured others, who then also became ensnared. It's a bleak picture, but it could explain the concentration of remains. There's another, surprisingly touching piece of evidence that hints at social behavior, albeit in a prehistoric, rather grim way. Some Smilodon fossils show signs of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting incredibly difficult. Yet, these individuals survived well into adulthood. This has led some paleontologists to propose a kind of pseudo-health care among Smilodon. The thought is that these injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodon, much like modern lions or wolves support injured members of their pride or pack. One particularly compelling example is a Smilodon fossil showing signs of hip dysplasia from a young age, an ailment that would have made solo hunting impossible. It's hard not to imagine a Smilodon family looking after its own, though I admit it's largely speculative. Of course, not everyone buys into the Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps, like Brea, tend to be more isolated. They argue that this pattern suggests a more solitary lifestyle, more in line with many modern big cats. Regardless of whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, one thing is certain. It sat at the very top of the food chain. But that doesn't mean it didn't face competition. The Ice Age was an era of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with a taste for mammoth-sized meals. Two of Smilodon's biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, while the dire wolves from Game of Thrones are impressive, the real dire wolves, though formidable, weren't quite as monstrous. Isotope analysis reveals that they shared a diet very similar to Smilodon's, meaning they were often competing for the same prey. So, how did Smilodon meet up against these competitors? Well, against the American lion, it was likely a bit of a standoff. The American lion had size on its side. being one of the largest cats to ever exist. But Smilodon boasted those incredible canines, which probably served as a pretty effective deterrent. Most likely, these two apex predators avoided each other when possible, but conflicts, when they occurred, could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves frequently abandoned their kills when a Smilodon showed up. It's not hard to see why. With those sabers on full display, most predators probably decided that discretion was the better part of valor. But lions and wolves weren't the only competition Smilodon had to worry about. The Ice Age also saw the rise of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small by comparison. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions, rivaling medium-sized sauropods in weight. However, these ursine giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures. So, if a group of Smilodon encountered one, the bear likely decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. We've discussed Smilodon's impressive hunting adaptations, but there's one question we haven't addressed yet. How did it even eat with those enormous teeth? After all, those saber-like fangs seem like they would have been quite an obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, situated on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat, while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats, and even other predators, use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem-solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Across its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator envious. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread. It was also remarkably adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodonts, the rhino-like toxodon, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to walk through those ancient Ice Age landscapes. It's a real-life version of those ice levels in video games, but with a terrifying twist. Saber-toothed cats. And then there were the humans. It's believed that our ancestors first crossed paths with Smilodon around 25,000 years ago. Imagine being one of those early humans. armed with nothing but primitive tools, coming face to face with a saber-toothed cat. The relationship between humans and Smilodon was likely tense. We were competing for the same food sources, and unfortunately for our ancestors, by the time humans arrived, only the larger Populator and Fatalis remained. Bad timing indeed. Given that Meganterion, a possible predecessor of Smilodon, was known to prey on Homo erectus, it's not a stretch to imagine that Smilodon might have considered early humans as potential prey, too. But humans are nothing if not resourceful. While there's no direct evidence yet of human-Smilodon confrontations, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables on these prehistoric predators from time to time. In 2021, researchers discovered something extraordinary, a petroglyph that seems to depict a group of humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a tantalizing glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with these magnificent and terrifying creatures. But this coexistence was not to last. Somewhere between then and now, Smilodon disappeared from the face of the earth. The youngest remains of both Fatalis and Populator date back to around 10,000 years ago, roughly the same time that humans in some parts of the world were figuring out agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon continues to fuel debate among paleontologists. Some argue that humans played a significant role in their demise, either through direct competition or by altering habitats through practices like fire starting. Others, however, are less convinced of humanity's impact. The more widely accepted theory points to the broader Quaternary extinction event as the primary culprit. This was a period of significant climate change that saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food began to die out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in an increasingly precarious position. In a cruel twist of fate, the very adaptations that had made Smilodon such a successful hunter of large prey now became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was, in essence, too good at what it did. And when the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked not just the end of a species, but the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy, however, still resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Mammoths were icons of the Ice Age, towering giants wrapped in shaggy armor. But they weren't the scariest things out there, not even close. Lurking in the same frozen wastelands was a creature that made mammoths look quaint. A beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. It didn't need curved tusks or a coat to command respect. All it needed, was a single monstrous weapon. One so lethal, so precise, that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sabericum. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't nearly intimidating enough. Now multiply that by roughly 3. Add the bulk of a small elephant and crown it with a single horn so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of Elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, it was monumentally, almost absurdly oversized, standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail. Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure, horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural, like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single, massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid, pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. The horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. I've spent years studying the giants of the Ice Age, and one creature continues to fascinate me: Elasmotherium. While mammoths lumbered, struggling against the cold, this creature was purpose-built for a frozen world. I'm talking about a 5-ton rhinoceros with a single horn that could reach 8 feet long. It wasn't just survival for Elasmotherium, it was domination. Let's begin with the legs. Unlike the mammoth's thick, pillar-like limbs, Elasmotherium possessed legs that were both powerful and surprisingly agile. These weren't just weight-bearing supports, they were the foundation of a charging mechanism. Imagine it, 5 tons of muscle and bone accelerating into a thundering full-speed charge that could flatten anything in its path. Mammoths carried their weight in a relatively even distribution, but Elasmotherium didn't. Its mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic collision. Millions of years of brutal efficiency honed into one purpose: impact. The shoulder muscles alone were powerful enough to absorb the shock of high-speed collisions that would have shattered the bones of lesser creatures. Perhaps most critically, Elasmotherium solved the fundamental problem that plagued many Ice Age giants: energy efficiency. While mammoths required vast quantities of vegetation to fuel their massive bodies, Elasmotherium's digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough vegetation that dominated the frozen steppes. This wasn't just survival. It was thriving in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to creatures with more delicate cranial architecture. This wasn't just about protection. It was about turning the entire head into a weapon system. When Elasmotherium charged, it wasn't just the horn that posed a threat. It was the entire front end of the creature functioning as an organic siege engine. Consider the mammoth's approach to survival, which largely relied on group protection and intimidation through size. Elasmotherium needed no such social strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare and a territorial competitor's worst enemy, capable of defending resources and territory through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled together for warmth and protection, Elasmotherium stood alone because nothing else on the frozen landscape posed a credible threat. And then there's that magnificent, terrifying horn. Potentially weighing as much as 100 pounds, it wasn't some decorative display piece. This was a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and presumably any creature unfortunate enough to challenge its owner. That's a horn longer than a standard parking space is wide, attached to a creature that could wield it with the precision of a medieval knight and the force of a freight train. The positioning was crucial. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, Elasmotherium's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. This placement meant that when the creature lowered its head to charge, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 miles. The physics alone are genuinely frightening. The horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis of its structure suggests it served multiple functions that gave Elasmotherium distinct advantages over its contemporaries. The base was broad and sturdy enough to serve as a snowplow, allowing the creature to clear feeding areas that would have been inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce and competition was fierce, this ability to access buried vegetation was literally a matter of life and death. The horned surface was likely covered in keratin, the same material that makes up our fingernails, but structured for maximum durability. This covering would have been constantly growing and self-sharpening, ensuring that the weapon remained effective throughout the creature's lifetime. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool of destruction. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than previously imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long, weapons that would have made the creature's intimidation factor approach the genuinely absurd. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry that has no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, creatures that were accustomed to being the apex predators of their respective environments, suddenly encountering something that could quite literally impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how Elasmotherium fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live, constantly aware that somewhere in the frozen wilderness there was a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it truly began. Domination made manifest, a weapon so effective that it redefined the very concept of herbivore. While mammoths were busy adapting to environments that barely tolerated their presence, Elasmotherium had claimed territories that actively welcomed their dominance. The key difference wasn't just what they could survive, it was what they could control. The Eurasian steppe during the Pleistocene was a landscape that seemed designed specifically for creatures like Elasmotherium. Vast open grasslands stretched for thousands of miles. The silence surrounding the extinction of the Elasmotherium is genuinely haunting. Here was an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet, it vanished with barely a trace. It makes the mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, seem less like triumph and more like luck. For a creature built like a living battering ram, the landscape of occasional river valleys and scattered patches of woodland must have felt like paradise. No dense forest to navigate, no steep terrain to negotiate, just endless expanses of territory where speed, power, and intimidation ruled supreme. What makes Elasmotherium's territorial dominance truly remarkable is that they weren't just surviving in these conditions. They were thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the wind-swept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds, territories where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation, and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. The secret, I believe, lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with the kind of aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon. It was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. Consider the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories in the process. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting press, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals, armed with 6-eft horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet it vanished with barely a trace. Elasmotherium wasn't just another Ice Age animal. It was, in my view, the pinnacle of prehistoric power. A creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined what dominance looked like. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether. Bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When I envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dimorphism inans, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters, around 5 feet tall when upright, and weighing up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds, It was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Populator, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabeys. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus anans based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great, Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and inans, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon, built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone made up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized postcranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a 4-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened. And Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. Imagine facing a defensive circle of 10 to 20 primates, each bristling with muscle and rage. That's what it might have been like to encounter Dinopithecus. This wasn't a creature that backed down easily. It simply didn't need to. During the time when Dinopithecus thrived in South Africa, the climate was shifting dramatically. These changes presented both challenges and opportunities for a primate of its immense size. Forests were slowly transforming into more open woodlands and grasslands, favoring species that could adapt to life on the ground. Fossil sites suggest that Dinopithecus inhabited a mosaic landscape, a mix of open savanna, woodlands, and riverine forests, quite similar to the environments favored by modern baboons. I picture their troop life mirroring that of modern baboons, but on a much more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were likely structured around strict dominance hierarchies, with adult males asserting their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. Some of these males weighed up to 150 kilograms. These clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males probably positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, their safe havens from nocturnal hunters. From there, the day would begin with movement and, of course, lots of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of their daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilos of plant matter each day. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, and tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. While plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented their diet with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, and scavenged carcasses. But here's where it gets interesting. Given their size and strength, they may have taken things a step further. Juvenile antelope, or the young of larger prey animals, might have been on the menu. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their sheer bulk may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact to communicate. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably incredibly nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established. Brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in close association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Koopa's Cave in South Africa's cradle of humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilograms. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilos, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilos. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources: fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. It wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have ended regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the extinction of Dinopithecus, it wasn't a sudden collapse but a slow fade under mounting press. I find myself often pondering such endings, the way even the most successful creatures can be undone by the slow grind of a changing world. It seems that even as early hominins were learning to survive, they were also facing similar challenges as Dinopithecus. Perhaps the press to develop tools and stronger social bonds was mounting. Imagine the advantage of cracking nuts with stones, digging for tubers with sharpened sticks, or coordinating a group defense in a landscape shared with mega monkeys. Then, of course, there were the predators, the predator dynamics of shared habitats. That's another fascinating layer to all of this. Both Dinopithecus and early hominins faced threats from the same array of fearsome carnivores, big cats, hyenas, and crocodiles. It's even possible that a troop of Dinopithecus might have offered some protection to nearby hominins, simply by being large and intimidating. The reverse could also be true. A small group of hominins might attract predators, inadvertently drawing attention to the Dinopithecus. Dinopithecus vanished around 1.8 to 1.6 million years ago. Climate change likely played a major role, with expanding grasslands and shrinking woodlands disrupting their food supply and shelter. Competition from smaller, more adaptable baboons may have further outpaced them, especially as the environment began to favor generalists. And then the rise of Homo erectus added new press. More advanced tool use, broader diets, and overlapping ecological needs likely intensified the competition for resources. Predation dynamics probably shifted too, with emerging carnivores increasing the risks, particularly for the young. It's even possible that disease played a role. Socially cohesive species are often vulnerable to outbreaks. The very traits that made Dinopithecus successful, large size, slow reproduction, and dietary specialization, may have ultimately made them vulnerable. Now, consider another creature, one known in ancient Greece as Inoxian dirus, the terrible wolf, a predator so dominant and ferocious that even the largest prehistoric animals feared it. With jaws that could tear through the flesh and bones of a mammoth, it struck fear into the hearts of all who crossed its path. I'm speaking, of course, of the dire wolf. Apex predators of their time, dire wolves were renowned for their meat-centric diet and intimidating hunting skills. They had unique dental features like distinct posterior cuspids and transverse crests, setting them apart from other wolf species. Even their digestive systems were tailored for processing meat, with short intestines optimized for their carnivorous diet. Their robust skeletons, powerful limbs, and broad chests speak volumes about their strength and hunting prowess. And their bite force, among the strongest of any canid, enabling them to take down formidable prey with remarkable efficiency. Dire wolves prowled across diverse landscapes, from the plains of North America to the arid savannas of South America and the steppes of Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison antiquus, Pleistocene horses like Equus scotti, and large ground sloths like Megalonyx. In South America, they feasted on a variety of prey, including large ground sloths, glyptodons, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camels like Hemialkinia. Crossing the eastern Asian steppes, they faced formidable opponents like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. Amidst fierce competition with other predators like Xenochion, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear, dire wolves fought fiercely for dominance in the food chain. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst trapped herbivores, showcasing their dominance by outnumbering gray wolves 5-1, demonstrating resilience in challenging environments. Living in monogamous pairs and hunting in packs, dire wolves displayed fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics reveal a great deal about their evolutionary prowess and survival instincts. With their impressive ability to hunt a wide range of prey, adaptability, and ferocity, the dire wolf truly stood as a ruler of the food chain. The origin of the dire wolf itself has sparked debate among scientists, with two conflicting theories proposed. One suggests an expansion of the genus Canis from Eurasia gave rise to the dire wolf. The other posits that the dire wolf emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. Recent advancements in genetic analysis have shed new light on these origins. Back in 1992, scientists tried to extract mitochondrial DNA from the skeletal remains of Anochion gildae, a close relative of modern wolves. But their efforts were thwarted by tar residue from the Brea pits, stubbornly clinging to the bone material. Then, in 2021, scientists finally got their hands on nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils, spanning thousands of years. These discoveries revealed that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines a staggering 5.7 million years ago. This supports the theory of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. Comparing dire wolves and gray wolves, it turns out that despite the similarity in their skeletal structures, they are not closely related. This is attributed to convergent evolution, where different species develop similar traits independently. Dire wolves stand out as a unique species within the canine world, quite distinct from modern gray wolves. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years, beginning with the arrival of the canid family in North America. When I think about that vast stretch of time, I'm humbled by the sheer scale of evolution and change. From fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini, the diverse branches of the canid family tree reveal variations that still fascinate me. Dire wolf fossils have been found in many different habitats across North and South America. Plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, and even arid savannas. The most abundant fossil areas are the Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles and the Tula Springs fossil beds in Nevada. It's interesting to imagine these creatures roaming such varied landscapes. While dire wolf remains are less common at high latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils challenge previous theories about their range. Fossils have been reported in various states in the United States, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. Dire wolf fossils have also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Josecito Cave and El Cedazo. And they've even been found in South America, with specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago in countries including Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China in 2020 suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia, challenging previous assumptions about barriers to their dispersal. It makes me wonder what other long-held assumptions will be overturned as we continue to unearth the past. Understanding the physical characteristics of dire wolves sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. The dire wolf, similar in proportions to modern North American wolves like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, exhibited variations in size and morphology. Some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves today, while others were larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences in dire wolves were observed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct cranio-dental features and limb proportions, compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. Interestingly, some had shorter and lighter limbs, making them less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while others possessed longer limbs comparable to the Yukon wolf. Around 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today during the Sangamonian interglacial period. The Wisconsin glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, also known as the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct 9 to 500 years ago, marking the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes, without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated, likely involving factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family and potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 and 9,500 years ago, significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced their survival. Dire wolves existed in diverse habitats, ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for dire wolf extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, its formidable presence and powerful bite force captivate our imagination. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to captivate our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest racids, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors, and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place, a hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork. Hardly the stuff of nightmares. But appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. Little did the other inhabitants of ancient South America know what was in store. I sometimes try to imagine the shock of those early mammals in Europe. Picture them, used to their familiar predators, suddenly confronted by a terror bird, a taste of South American terror, brought to the Old World. Eleutherornis, they would have called it, a globe-trotting terror that stood 50% taller than its ancestor. Its fossil remains have been found in France and Switzerland. But even Eleutherornis was just the beginning. As the epochs rolled by, these terror birds seemed to be in a relentless competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors. The Oligocene epoch, about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point. It was during this time that the family truly began to live up to its name with the emergence of giants. Paraphysornis, for example, a Brazilian bird, was an absolute behemoth. It stood 4.5 feet tall and weighed a whopping 400 pounds, outweighing even the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight contender. Paraphysornis was built like a feathered tank. Paleontologists believe it hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak, a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts, perhaps. It likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, making them formidable hunters. But as impressive as Paraphysornis was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family. These creatures pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. 3 names stand out: Titanus, Kelenkin, and Brontornis. Each of these genera represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. Standing 6.6 feet tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pleistocene horse or ground sloth suddenly confronted by this alien predator. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenkin, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 9.8 feet tall and weighed around 550 pounds. It was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Recent studies have shown that Kelenkin and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that gave them increased bite force and pecking power. This suggests that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought. The title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 9.2 feet, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 880 pounds. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time, and the fourth heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. I imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird world. I find myself captivated by the image of a terror bird in full flight, a feathered missile capable of steamrolling any prey in its path. While some, like the Kelenken and Brontornis, relied on sheer size, others took a different route, speed. And it turns out this adaptation was just as crucial in their world. Studies of terror bird leg bones have revealed a structure strikingly similar to that of modern ostriches. Short thigh bones paired with elongated lower leg and foot bones, a clear sign of high-speed running. Paleontologists estimate that some of the larger species, like Titanus, could have reached speeds exceeding 30 mph, faster than Usain Bolt, while being twice as tall and weighing several times as much. But speed wasn't just for hunting. For many, especially the smaller species, it was a crucial defense. In a world filled with giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, a quick getaway could mean the difference between life and death. This combination of speed and size made terror birds versatile predators, adapting to various hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species might have chased down swift prey like small mammals and reptiles. The larger, more powerful ones could have employed ambush tactics or even taken on larger quarry. While their size and beaks often steal the spotlight, the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Recent studies of their skulls have revealed sensory capabilities that put them leagues ahead of their contemporaries. While their eyesight might not have been as sharp as modern raptors, it was far from impaired. Their eyes were well developed and positioned for excellent depth perception, a crucial advantage. What truly set their vision apart was its versatility. They were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and the dim light of dawn and dusk, making them effective hunters around the clock. The inner ear structure of terror birds suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This would have allowed them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey even when hidden by dense vegetation. I picture one standing motionless in a prehistoric forest, head cocked slightly. To a casual observer, it might appear to be resting, but every fiber of its being is alert, its incredibly sensitive ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves. In an instant, it could pinpoint the location of its unsuspecting prey and launch into action. This combination of visual and auditory prowess made terror birds the complete predatory package. No wonder these birds dominated their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the reign of the terror birds was no exception. For millions of years, these avian predators had ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, about 2.7 million years ago. This event saw the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, creating a land bridge between North and South America. Animals from both continents migrated across this connection, significantly reshuffling the fauna. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America, including cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their extinction. It seemed like a neat and tidy explanation. However, as is often the case, the truth has turned out to be more complex. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors that led to their downfall. One of the primary challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their main South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in South America in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Titanus not only successfully expanded its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change in particular may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open landscapes. I've always been fascinated by the stories of extinction, the what-ifs, and the near misses. Imagine a world where terror birds still roamed South America when the first humans arrived. Giant, feathered predators surviving almost to the cusp of human arrival. It's a tantalizing thought, isn't it? The terror birds, those formidable hunters of South America, faced immense challenges as their world transformed. As open grasslands replaced forests, some adapted, but the larger, more specialized species struggled to find enough prey. And then came new competitors from North America, adding prey to their already stressed populations. But these birds were remarkably resilient. We used to think they vanished around 1 million years ago, but recent fossil discoveries have changed everything. We found evidence of smaller species surviving until just 96,000 years ago, a blink of an eye, geologically speaking. Even more intriguing is a set of fossils, potentially from a new species, dated to only 18,000 years ago. If that's confirmed, it would mean they survived almost until humans arrived in South America around 15,000 years ago. It raises so many questions. How close did humans come to encountering them? What would that encounter have been like? Could the legends of giant birds in South American folklore hold a grain of truth? It's unlikely there were direct interactions, but the possibility that early humans heard stories of these creatures passed down through generations isn't far-fetched. After all, other megafauna like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths left lasting impressions on human culture and mythology. This near miss between humans and terror birds reminds us of the incredible diversity of life that once existed on our planet. It's sobering to think that if they had managed to survive just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different. Thinking about apex predators, the Tyrannosaurus rex immediately comes to mind. For so long, we've seen it as the ultimate prehistoric terror, with its earth-shaking steps and teeth like knives. Even now, its reputation as the most frightening creature to ever walk the earth endures. But how terrifying was the T-Rex, really? Back in 1902 in Montana, a paleontologist named Barnum Brown discovered the first known fragment of a T-Rex skeleton. That discovery sparked a new era of dinosaur research. Major finds, like the virtually complete specimen Sue discovered in South Dakota, have given us invaluable information about its morphology, behavior, and scientific significance. Through careful excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction, researchers have pieced together the story of this giant predator and its role as a prominent apex predator during the late Cretaceous period. T-Rex, along with other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus, belongs to the Tyrannosaurini subtribe within the Tyrannosauridae family. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the last and most widely recognized tyrannosaurid species, reigned as the top predator of the late Cretaceous era and stands as a key figure in dinosaur evolution. These creatures were immense. A T-Rex could reach a length of up to 12 meters, about the size of a school bus, from snout to tail. Some paleontologists speculate that certain specimens exceeded 13 meters, dwarfing any other land predator of the time. But it wasn't just their length. These giants stood up to 6 meters tall at the hips. Imagine that, an enormously tall creature on powerful legs, its massive frame bearing down, head held high as it surveyed its realm. And how heavy were these remarkable creatures? Estimates suggest a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons, skin and flesh covering its massive bones. That's like several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column comprised of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. The exact number of tail vertebrae varied, but its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head. Pneumatic depressions and robust neural spines provided strength and flexibility. The forelimbs were short with 2 clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs, contributing to its imposing stature. The pelvis featured a lengthy ilium and a large pubic boot, while the hind foot had an arctometatarsallian metatarsus. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, crucial for supporting its bulk. The Tyrannosaurus rex renowned for its massive size and impressive strength, possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length, about the size of an adult human. The skulls of Tyrannosaurus rex featured large fenestrae, which reduced their weight. But these weren't just any skulls. They showcased unique adaptations. I'm talking about an extremely wide rear and a narrow snout, ensuring exceptional binocular vision. These skulls, composed of massive yet fused bones, contributed to a powerful bite, surpassing that of non-tyrannosaurids. When I first read about that U-shaped tip on the upper jaw, I pictured the extraction of tissue and bone with each bite, even though that design heightened stress on the front teeth. The teeth themselves. The upper jaw teeth had prominent ridges and tips that curled backward like cutting tools. It's this distinct heterodonty that sets them apart, and the remaining teeth, robust and spaced, resembled lethal bananas. I know it sounds strange, but that's the best way to describe them. In mature individuals, the upper jaw housed larger teeth than the lower jaw, with the largest tooth discovered measuring a staggering 30.5 centimeters in length. Numerous small openings were observed in both the upper and lower jaws, suggesting potential sensory functions or perhaps indications of external structures. Of course, when we think of Tyrannosaurus rex, we can't ignore the disproportionately small arms. For years, they were considered useless remains, but some recent speculation suggests that these small arms were, in fact, deadly weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley proposes that they were lethal weapons. Just 3 feet long, they had crescent-shaped claws, sharpened to a razor edge, capable of causing deadly injuries to unsuspecting prey. Imagine the moment when the T-Rex advances towards its target, its huge head hanging above, while its strong front limbs make rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscles with frightening accuracy. This new information gives us a better understanding of how the T-Rex hunted, showcasing its skill in quickly and effectively immobilizing its prey. The arms, once thought to be useless structures, are now recognized as crucial weapons in its hunting tactics, adding to the fear of this prehistoric dominant predator. And what about its eyesight? The Jurassic Park movies emphasize the T-Rex's poor eyesight, showing characters evading its notice by remaining still. But recent scientific findings suggest otherwise. Paleontologists, drawing upon comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision like contemporary predators like hawks, with the ability to detect both moving and stationary objects. This challenges its cinematic depiction and deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Another perspective suggests the T-Rex was an adept ambush predator, utilizing its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Conversely, some view it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion or scavenging from carcasses. These differing views underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role, fueling ongoing debates among researchers. Beyond eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex possessed a remarkable sense of smell akin to vultures today. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. And it wasn't just about smelling. The T-Rex excelled at hunting because of its quick speed. Able to detect prey from a distance, it could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour, a pace comparable to Usain Bolt's world record sprinting speed. Imagine wandering in a primeval environment, trying to navigate back to safety with the noises of the woods echoing. Suddenly, a tremendous noise halts you. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is approaching, causing your heart to race. Desperately trying to escape, you sprint frantically, your feet pounding on the forest floor. Yet, you feel the earth tremble under your feet as the T-Rex closes in. Glancing back, you see its massive silhouette with gleaming sharp teeth under the sun's rays. Realizing to no escape, the T-Rex's jaws close on you with incredible force. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin simultaneously, sending waves of agony through your body. In that horrifying moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding and diet of the Tyrannosaurus Rex were integral to its dominance as a top predator during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, the T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large herbivorous dinosaurs such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, which were among the toughest dinosaurs of their time. At times, T-Rex would also prey upon other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. It's believed that T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind or even formidable predators, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus Rex had a significant impact on its surroundings beyond its role as an efficient hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus Rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Denvosaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. The T-Rex's formidable presence characterized by everything we've been discussing. Forget horned helmets and storm-tossed seas. As I read the old sagas, I've come to believe that the Vikings faced something far more terrifying. Creatures so colossal and powerful, they seemed ripped from legend. These weren't just animals. They were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands. They battled nature itself in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. Standing at a towering 1.8 meters or 6 feet at the shoulder, these weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh up to 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What made aurochs truly intimidating were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span up to 1 meter or 3.3 feet from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools. They were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 35 kilometers or 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. Many Norse graves contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs' populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting preyers. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaguar-Sized forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the North Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines. Colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 75 to 85 centimeters, or 2.5 to 2.8 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 35 kilometers or 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on two legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Elde off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogelg in the Old Norse tongue. A creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species, standing up to 2.1 meters or 7 feet at the shoulder, with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet across. These forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting prey and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose, with their uniformly dark coats, Viking-era Daons suggest a more varied palette. I've always been fascinated by the forest elk, a creature that once roamed Scandinavia. Cave paintings suggest they had distinctive light patches on their sides and shoulders. These markings weren't just for show, they provided excellent camouflage in the dappled light of the ancient forests. Their behavior, I've read, was supposedly more aggressive than modern moose, especially during the mating season. The bulls wouldn't just compete for females, they would actively defend their territories. For the Vikings, these massive deer were a vital resource. A single animal could provide over 500 kilograms, that's 100 pounds, of meat, enough to feed a small village for weeks during those harsh northern winters. Their hides, tougher and more durable than domestic cattle leather, were prized for shields, boats, and winter clothing. But perhaps most valued were their enormous antlers, transformed by Viking craftsmen into everything from tools and weapons to drinking horns for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, these forest elk populations were already showing signs of decline. The combination of intensive hunting and forest clearing for agriculture fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. As Viking settlements expanded, encounters with these magnificent beasts became increasingly rare. Medieval sources describe them as creatures of the remote wilderness, rather than animals regularly seen near human habitation. But as impressive as these forest giants were, they weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. For deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers swam another unexpected powerhouse, one that proved just as valuable and equally dangerous. While spotting a whale today feels like a rare and wondrous sight, for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone. But hunting them meant rowing dangerously close where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship and send its crew to a cold, watery grave. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. During the Viking Age, however, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, particularly in coastal waters where their distinctive feeding behavior made them both visible and vulnerable. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, that's 46 to 49 feet, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons. This made them roughly the size of a Viking longship, a comparison that wouldn't have been lost on Norse seafarers. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that featured in Norse daeons of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique among the cetaceans Vikings encountered was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, gray whales were bottom feeders, plowing the seafloor for small invertebrates and creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. For Norse communities, gray whales represented an extraordinary bounty when successfully hunted. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence from coastal North settlements shows specialized bone tools designed specifically for processing whale meat alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. The hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats, using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devil fish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate, females typically give birth to just one calf every 2 years, set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. For the forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme: the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years, before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. Standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan, but smaller than modern timber wolves, British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 centimeters or 28 to 33 inches at the shoulder and weighed between 30 to 45 kilograms or 66 to 99 pounds. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era daeons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I find myself often wondering about the creatures that shared the world with the Vikings. It turns out that archaeological evidence from early Viking settlements in the Hebdes and Northern Isles reveals wolf bones with cut marks. This suggests the newcomers quickly began hunting these predators. For Vikings establishing permanent colonies in the British Isles, wolves represented both a threat and an opportunity. Their attacks on livestock, particularly sheep, made them natural enemies of settlers. Yet Viking warriors also respected their hunting prowess and pack coordination, qualities they themselves valued in battle. This complex relationship, manifested in Norse place names still found across former Viking territories in Britain. Locations like Olvedale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers frequently encountered these predators. Several Viking-era runestones discovered in northern England depict wolf hunts, suggesting these dangerous pursuits held ceremonial significance for warriors establishing their prowess in new lands. British wolves left their mark on Viking folklore as well. As Norse settlers integrated with local populations, they adopted and transformed Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The wolf-warrior connection strengthened, with berserkers sometimes described wearing wolf pelts rather than bear skins. The fate of British wolves, however, was sealed not by Vikings, but by their descendants and successors. As Norse settlements transitioned into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became policy. The process began during the Viking Age, but accelerated afterward, with the last wolves in England eliminated during the 15th century, and Scotland's final wolves hanging on until the 17th century. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786, ending a predator lineage that had witnessed everything from the first Celtic settlers to the Viking invasions and beyond. Another animal they encountered seemed like a relic from a more primeval age, armored leviathans that lurked beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe, the Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These living fossils, largely unchanged for over 200 million years, once dominated the waterways of Viking territories, but have since vanished from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon reached truly massive proportions, with females growing up to 3 meters in length and weighing over 300 kilograms. Their prehistoric appearance, with bony plates called scutes arranged in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable among European fish species. Most distinctive was their elongated armor-plated snout, with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly designed for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from river and sea floors. Their immense size made a single catch noteworthy enough to feature in regional sagas, with several Norse tales mentioning heroes who wrestled armored river dragons. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to penetrate the fish's armored exterior, a testament to how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons offered multiple valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass, used for clarifying beer and wine, as well as making a powerful adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint ailments. Most prized was sturgeon roe, caviar, which became a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already in decline in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, females maturing at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes and pollution worsened their plight. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had grown so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, a protection that came too late to save them. But as Vikings turned their sights inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to shaggy titans of the forest, massive beasts that carved their own trails through the dense woodlands. I'm speaking of the European bison and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison familiar to us today, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 1.9 meters at the shoulder and weighing over 900 kilograms, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps covered with shaggy dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their distinctive curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically. The world the Vikings knew was vanishing even as they sailed. The creatures that defined their landscapes were already fading into memory. It's sobering to realize that human expansion and climate changes fueled the Viking Age and also pushed some of the great beasts of that time toward extinction. Consider the European bison. These animals, capable of reaching speeds of 40 kilometers an hour, even through dense woodland, were a force to be reckoned with. Their sheer size and power meant a single charge could easily kill multiple hunters. I've read accounts in the Norse sagas of entire hunting parties being destroyed by enraged bulls. By the late Viking Age, their populations were already in decline across much of their former range. The combination of intensive hunting and forest clearing for agriculture pushed these magnificent animals into increasingly isolated pockets. Unlike the aurochs, however, the European bison narrowly escaped complete extinction. A small population survived in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus. Today, approximately 7,000 descendants live there, a last direct link to the forest giants Vikings once hunted.